Welcome to CxXchange Success Hour. I'm so excited today. Our topic is before you say yes, vet a startup like a pro. And I'm really excited to have Miranda Dziekonski here today. Um, did I just mess up your name
No,
again?
you did it perfect. It just
And I am just thrilled. This is something that we had talked about a little bit just through a chat. And I know a little bit of Miranda's story, and I knew that she would have a lot to share on this topic. And I'm so excited to have you here today, Miranda. I know that there's others here who will also have some thoughts and insights and questions on this topic. And of course, we want you to all contribute. But first, Miranda, please introduce yourself so we have it on record, how you pronounce your name, and also a little bit about yourself.
yeah, so Miranda Dziekonski. So I've been doing customer facing operations and operations in general for about 27 years now. I got my start in the late 90s and early 2000s working for a company that was 40 plus billion dollars a year in revenue. Prior to even that, I actually worked in a factory in Greenville, Michigan, building refrigerators. And then after spending a decade doing customer success type work, account management for a company that supported General Motors, Ford, Toyota, Bosch, AstraZeneca, accounts like that, I made the trek to Silicon Valley. I've now been in 11 tech startups. So I left the $40 billion a year, 35,000 employee world behind to join early stage to growth stage startups. So I've seen everything from seed to, massive exits. I've been very fortunate in my career. Out of the 11 startups, I've now have 5 exits, got 5 payouts, which is exciting. And then on top of that, though, I've also seen 2, 3 go under. And there are a couple that are still hobbling along, trying to find their way and their identity. So you can, I guess it's safe to say that I'm very passionate about startups. Other little things about me, outside of customer success, which is I know what most of us do here. Those that know me, like Sean, also know that I have a background in HR. So I had HR as well for a decade. So 4 years at Swiftly, I was the chief customer and people officer. So built out all of the HR function there, and I've owned HR at multiple organizations, both officially and unofficially. But yeah, that's a bit about me in a nutshell.
I love too that you have that background in HR because it really helps. I mean, besides being a hiring manager, having that background in HR really gives you a sense of like hiring across as well as just the whole management of people within an organization. So,
Yeah.
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 Okay, so let's go back and we'll get started with some of the topics here. And and one thing that I thought was important to start with here is just an overview because startups are risky, right? And the thing about it is, I have two exits under my belt, so to speak, but they were not. I never got payouts. I didn't bother. I don't know. Maybe I would have gotten a dollar, for investing 90 cents or something, but a little bit of a payout. But you know, it, really, when you take a look at it, 80% of startups do not get funding to go to the next round, depending upon where you are in the process. Like if you're going from pre-seed to seed, it's about 50-50. But when you're going to seed to A, there's only 15 to 35% that make it to A, and now the other thing that's happening, and I thought it was really important to cover, is that there's a stark difference. We're going through major change right now, and so the difference between AI first versus SaaS that's adding AI, that's really going to start to shake out the market a lot, and they don't truly understand what the trends are for AI first yet. They're still trying to get traction, and some of them are getting traction, some of them are just getting a lot of experimentation. Um, uh, but regardless, all the teams and companies are much smaller in AI first than what we were seeing through traditional SaaS. Traditional SaaS grew their revenue by growing people. AI first companies are really trying to take advantage of the productivity and insights that you get from AI and working smarter, not harder. Well, maybe harder too. So I wanted to be sure that we just sort of talked through just how risky startups are. And I don't know that if you go to an enterprise company that it's any less risky these days because a lot of them are doing a lot of cuts and trying to get the effectiveness of startups as well. So I'm not saying this to scare people. I'm saying this to make certain that you understand kind of what is happening in the market landscape, because it's really critical then when you are at a company already, or if you're interviewing at a company, to understand what sort of questions to ask. And that's where we're going to spend most of our time. But I thought it was important to start with that context. Um,
Can I also just call
yeah,
out one thing?
yeah.
Yes, it is true that larger organizations are doing, riffs left and right. This has been going on for years. My husband works for a very large organization, and it feels like every year they're doing some kind of riff. So it's usually, to help balance their books and make the numbers look a little bit better. But with startups, it's just a completely different game. So you can't, comparing like the startup world to a well-established organization, it's like comparing an apple to an orange. They're both fruits because they're both businesses, but very different kinds of fruit, right?
Right.
And the great thing about startups and why I love it, and it's not for everyone, and we'll talk a little bit about how I assess startups, is um, it's perfect for folks that love to build, to get their hands dirty, to feel like they can leave a little bit of themselves in an organization. It is not for everyone. And I went from the $40 billion a year company to startup, so I saw this firsthand. You look at a lot of folks that play in seed, Series A, Series B, and you'll see a lot of short tenures because these organizations either don't make it to the next graduation phase, or they do and they change so rapidly from Series A to Series C that it requires different skill sets. So these are just things to keep in mind that if you're going into a company where you're looking for a playbook or a manual on how to do things, a structured onboarding, stability, this is not the place to play. Once you get to seed or sorry, Series C and above, usually it's a little more structured, even Series B and above. But seed, Series A, it's like a little bit of the wild, wild west. I personally love it, but again, it's not for everyone. And plus, the risk is pretty big, but the reward can be high too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great point to bring out. In fact, I was just writing today a post on LinkedIn about how AI first companies especially are changing so fast that even the idea of a playbook doesn't really work as well anymore. But yeah, no, it's fantastic you point that out. All right, let me go ahead and move on and let's dig into the topic here. And again, if you have something to contribute or a question, questions are also contributions. So want to be sure that you either put it in the chat or feel free to raise your hand.
Yeah, so when I was sitting down and thinking about what are the things that I assess, before I hop into it, let me talk to you a little bit about some of the startups that I've joined and some of their exits without naming names. And you can go and look at my LinkedIn profile. How I've determined what I've assessed is from my lived experiences. So one company, we went from 50 people to 500 people in 2 years. We had a unicorn exit. We hit that billion-dollar valuation before everybody was getting billion-dollar valuations. Then another company, we had an acquisition that was incredibly successful. And then I joined as a COO of a seed company. And the culture was just off, even though it was C. There were 30 people there. And the CEO drove a very interesting culture there that I wasn't behind or aligned with. Then we had a COVID closure, um, and so on and so forth. So when I sit down and think about where I want to be, I start and I write a list of all the things that matter to me. And that's usually, and you'll notice I've put up first and foremost culture. Culture is so crucial, not just for happiness and your mental health, but also how people work together, get stuff done. I've seen companies that have solid products, but the culture is so terrible that they couldn't get anything done.
Yeah.
They couldn't maneuver. So that is thing one. Thing two, product. I have been part of a company that built the entire company on a no-code product base. It looked great, but it functioned terribly. And as a CS leader, I never thought I would need to ask a question about the code base, but I've
Mhm.
now added that. What do you code on? What language do you code in? Because those things actually matter more than most CS leaders like to think, because it's going to impact how you stand up customers, how you support customers,
Yeah.
and how your company evolves and grows.
Yeah.
So that is another thing. Size, I love to play, probably 30 to 100 people is when I like to join. And, probably 5 million-ish to 10 million-ish I like to join. And then I do that to 50 million journey. Once it gets to the 50 million journey, I'm usually done. And one of the things that I didn't add here that I should have is funding. So those who also know me know that a couple of companies ago, I led an organization through pretty painful layoffs where I personally sat on 30 back-to-back Zooms, let people go, then did another round a few months later, letting people go, slowly winding a company down. I was very enamored with the story of the CEO and the problems they were trying to solve that I didn't look under the hood. Everybody gets really shy when it comes to asking, how much runway do you have? What does your burn look like? How are you marching towards your rule of 40? And I now ask these questions and also offer up to sign an NDA so I can see the balance sheet. I want to understand how much money do we have in the bank. I get runway is it can adjust, it can shift monthly, depending on how much you spend. So if somebody says we have 12 months runway, um, that it doesn't give you the full context, right? So you want to dig in a little bit more and ask questions about how does spending happen here? How are budgets approved? How do you look at investing in headcount, right? And quite frankly, after all of the layoffs I've done, I'm looking for a controlled burn, not a fast burn. I want to make sure that the folks that, I partner with, we have a little bit of stability, which is a little bit of an oxymoron in startup world because having stability in startup world is uh, challenging.
Just on that point, David Medeo in the chat saying, I think there's a big difference whether you can ask that question based on your role. I do think that it's easier to ask that and offer to do an NDA if you're going for a leadership role. But I do think that even if you are going for like, a CSM role or middle management role, I think that it shows that you have that sort of business acumen and what you bring to the role if you understand to ask those questions. So I do think it's worthwhile to offer to sign an NDA and ask those questions and have them really engage with you in that way. I think then the contributions you get to make to the company are going to be seen in a different way if you understand what's behind that. So I think it's worthwhile to do that. Another thing, when I was at the Primary Ventures on the Business Mastery Day recently in San Francisco, they were talking about how they evaluate founders and CEOs. And I think
Wow.
that's another thing to keep in mind is that your founder CEO needs to be someone that the VCs will look at and say, yes, we should take a bet on them in the next round. And so you want to also kick the tires on that a little bit and really look into who the CEO is. Are they a first-time founder? Do they have deep experience in the area? What are they bringing to the organization? Ask around a little bit. Now, you may feel like, yeah, but Jan, I just need a job. If they offered me a job, I would take it. Certainly. However, you might then 3, 6, 12 months be looking for another job. So given how much time it takes to look for a role, it is worthwhile to kick the tires a little bit and really, figure out if this next step in your career is worthy of being the next step in your career.
Yeah, I will add one thing to David's point as well, and how I've had CS candidates ask me about the financials. You can approach it in a very delicate way if you are a CSM level candidate and just say, I get that I am interviewing at a startup and I get that there's going to be a certain level of volatility, but what I'm literally looking for is a place where I can make an impact for the next couple of years. Can you talk to me a little bit about the financial situation? How much runway does the company have? Do you partner with PE firms or VC firms? And just know, as a CS level candidate, PE firms function very different than VCs, right? PE is a little bit more cautious, a little bit more methodical, where VC is usually grow, baby, grow, spend, baby, spend. So those are the kind of things as a CS candidate, you shouldn't be shy, but you just have to be a little bit more delicate. Whereas I'm going in usually as a VP or a C level, it's usually a very heavy mutual courting. So me asking to look at the P&L isn't an uncommon thing at C level. So it's a good call out there, David.
Yeah. And we should talk about the anti-goals and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I've talked about this before, but I have a list of my own anti-goals. Sometimes when you sit down and you're like, what do I want? You're like, I don't know what I want, but you almost always know what you don't want, right? So this is an example of my personal anti-goals. I've consolidated this list because I actually have probably about 50. So I'm only sharing six. Start with what you don't want. So as a CS leader, I want a company that values CS. So I have a way of analyzing and scoping that out to see if there is value around CS. Um, I want to work for leaders, especially because of my close exposure and reporting to CEOs that trust me. And how they run the organization isn't a control first, it's a trust. I want to work in a culture where feedback is where I won't work in a culture where feedback is feared instead of welcomed. That's how we get better. So this is just a great way to frame what you don't want and help you get to what you do want. So if you don't have anti-goals, I highly recommend, even if you're employed, have anti-goals to kind of have them as your true north, your center.
awesome.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Was there a question about that? Okay, great. Um, awesome.
Okay. So I have a link to some articles later, which will take you to some LinkedIn articles where I've published different interview questions, way to prep for interviews, how to assess. But I wanted to share here four key buckets that I tend to look at, and it's the business related things, the CS related things, the team, and then the board. If you are at a leadership level, don't forget to ask questions about the board, and I'll go into that in a minute. But business related, I just call out some obvious here, all the numbers. So really dig in on where they are on KPIs, sales numbers. How how many folks in the sales team hit their quota? How are the quarters marching along? Are we meeting our numbers quarter over quarter? And this can be a little bit more sensitive at the CS level, but dig in to how hard it is to meet those numbers. Because when you get into an organization that has a limited TAM, a limited total addressable market, what ends up happening is the pressure then gets pushed over to the customer success side to do the back to base sales, which is your upsell. So just know that those things all matter in how you will function and how you will operate. There are other things that you're going to want to dig into around employee attrition. Is there a high turnover? Quick story. I joined a company that had the worst Glassdoor reviews that I'd ever seen in my life. And I even called, I know my predecessor personally, and I called him. And I still thought, damn it, I'm Miranda Dziekonski. I can make an impact here. I'm not going to pay attention to this because I've also ran HR and I know sometimes Glassdoor reviews are inflated, but there were about 560 of them. Okay. So I ignored a flag because I really wanted this and thought that I could make an impact, only to find out I couldn't and had the shortest tenure ever and put my notice in because the culture was just that bad. Pay attention to those things, right? Don't ignore
Mhm.
them. Now, granted, you got to take everything with a grain of salt, but pay attention. I knew logically I should have. I didn't. I thought I could change it. I was at an executive level. The reality was I couldn't. Um, CS related questions. You've all heard this before.
Before you go on,
Yeah.
I do have to just weigh in on that. That was part of why I wanted Miranda to come today, was because I knew that story, and also because I had one similar where I had a red flag during an interview where I interviewed with somebody. I'm like, well, but I wouldn't be reporting to him. I could probably avoid him. You can't. You just don't. And so pay attention to those red flags. Anyway, sorry. Go back to what you're talking about, but
Yeah, no, it's
oh boy,
I
that was
I've
painful.
had it happen twice in my career.
Yeah.
Sometimes my Midwest nice outweighs my logical brain. Like I'm like, oh gosh,
Oh,
I can do this, right? So yeah. Moving on to CS related questions. If you are in CS, I'm assuming almost everybody here, if not everybody here, is in CS in one way or another. It's just important to know where that CS sits in the org. Do you report to sales? Do you report directly to the CEO? If you're interviewing for a leadership role, figure out what happened to the previous leader. Is this a new role? Is this a backfill? These are all things when you're assessing your startup and your role that you're going to want to dig in on. Um, then, of course, the team related questions. You're going to want to understand, especially if it's 100% remote, what does team engagement look like? Because there is nothing more lonely than sitting in a room in your home, onboarding into a new company where you know nobody, and there isn't a deliberate thought about how the team should engage and how people should be brought along. I even, specifically request, as should at every level, to meet with a few folks that you would partner closely with from other organizations. If you're a CSM, ask if you can talk to an AE. Again, I know a lot of people, especially if you've been unemployed for a while and you're assessing this startup and you're in the interview and it's hard to get the interview. You don't want to step on toes. I if you are interviewing for an organization and you ask to speak with a peer and they hold that against you, that alone is your sign. Um, so,
yeah.
lastly, as I mentioned earlier, there is a big difference between reporting up through a PE board versus a VC
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
Massive difference. How many folks here are at the leadership level? I don't know if you can share in the chat, but it'd be
Sure.
helpful for me to understand.
Yeah.
Hi, David. I know. Hi. Yes. Uh, thank you. This is super helpful. The board is is like it can make or break your experience because what the board cares about is what your CEO cares about is what will drive your life.
Yeah.
Um, Also, ask if you are in a leadership role, ask what the exit strategy is. I don't know why people don't do this. They tiptoe around this idea of an exit strategy, but that also changes how you will be able to function by knowing what the exit strategy is. So, how I approach that is, hey, are you thinking about IPO? Is this some kind of build it to sell it? Do you think, okay, so you're PE backed. PE firms usually hold 3 to 5 years. How long ago was your investment? Do you know if the PE firm that you're currently working with has a goal for you to be sold in 5 years? Right? These are the things you're going to want to know because it will dictate how you get resources or how you don't get resources within the confines of that startup.
Yeah.
VC usually they're a little bit looser with their money, but it's a little bit more volatile. So
And the expectations are very high on growth. Very,
yeah, it's usually
very much so.
triple at the earlier stage. It's usually triple, triple, and then it's double, 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 double. Right? It's like
And
uh,
with AI first, they're actually going quadruple, quadruple, triple, triple. Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah, and also if it is a company, so take a look at, if you haven't done it already, research Gamma, which I'm a huge fan of Gamma as a tool, but their growth has been crazy. And I
yeah.
think companies like Gamma app, which is the AI tool for doing presentations, I think they're going to be setting the new bar for
Mhm.
future companies. So really pay attention to what these AI companies are doing and how much revenue they have managed to create with the amount of team members. That's the barometer that people are looking at, and that's the bar that we're going to be held to in the future.
Yeah. And you really need to understand if they're AI first or if they are traditional SaaS that's adding AI. And if it's PE, if you're at a PE company, it's important to understand if you are the acquired or if you're the lead company. But if you're joining a PE company, then you want to a PE funded company, as a new hire, then you want to understand kind of how are they still in acquisitions or why are they hiring? Like, what are they, really, what is that game plan? We're in a world for startups, it's about the funding. And so understanding that funding, even if it feels a little scary, it's not, you don't need to understand, what all of the financial analysts are looking at. You just need to sort of understand some of the basics that impact the dynamics that you're going to be working within, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I will also add one more thing when you're assessing startups. More rounds of funding isn't always better. Sometimes it's bad. So, um, in my humble opinion, I think the more successful startups that I've worked with have been very, very thoughtful about their investments and getting to profitability. And that's on the PE side, to be clear. I've played in both VC and PE. I prefer PE. That's just me. That's where I've had more of my success in my exits and stuff like that. But if you're seeing companies, which this was very relevant years ago, go for Series D, Series E, Series F, and they're celebrating these on, LinkedIn. And I'm looking at this, I'm like, why do you keep needing so
Mhm.
much more investments to get yourself to profitability? Now, some of it is deliberate, some of it makes sense. But a lot of it to me is just a sign of potential instability or potential mismanagement. So just kind of go out, do your research. AI makes this so easy. I used to, pay for premium Crunchbase, go in and read all of the investments, where they were coming from, who was backing. You can get most of that stuff for free now just through an AI search. So, um, I know we have breakouts, but just a few important things to do when you're assessing startups. If you have the ability to be a customer, be a customer. That's a little bit harder with B2B enterprise, but there are a lot of tools out there that offer, free access. I highly suggest you go in and do that. Read the help center, read customer employee reviews, scope out social media accounts, and read comments. Don't just read the reviews, read the comments of what's being said by the company when they reply, but also when others reply. As a matter of fact, the one company where I ignored the major red flags, their Facebook was just a treasure trove of upset people. Um, so just go out there, put on your detective hat, and get a good understanding. Read through job descriptions. This is a little, probably, I'm sure you probably haven't heard this advice often, but it can really paint a direction for where the company is going if you take a look at what they're hiring for and also how they talk about the roles in the job description can paint the culture. Uh, are, are they requiring Ivy League degrees for entry-level roles? Are they requiring 5 years experience for entry-level roles, but paying, for 1 year experience, right? Like, pay attention to those things. The last thing I will call out here is never be shy to reach out to previous employees and ask them about their experience, but take it with a grain of salt, okay? You don't know the story, you don't know the narrative behind the scene as to why they are a former employee. But what I would do is talk to multiples and collect it as data points and use those data points to help with your narrative. And
Ah, and David makes a good point over Cobra only exists if the company still exists. So if the company's going out of business, your Cobra also may then go away. Why don't we go ahead and head out to breakout rooms, at least for 10 minutes. So, any
yeah,
other thoughts or insights shared when we went to the breakout rooms? We just have a few minutes, but I want to be sure to share with each other.
I think
You
there was a
learned,
lot of echoing of the same sentiments that were shared in a larger group, right?
yeah.
Joining with circumstances that were suboptimal, right? Orange flags that turned into red flags, yellow flags that turned into orange flags, and sort of the collection of the of those circumstances led to outcomes that were suboptimal, layoffs, organizations moving around, hiring managers that brought you in leaving and leaving you kind of out to the wind. So
I
really good conversation.
I do have a question if no one else has their hand up. I know you mentioned like Glassdoor reviews. Are there any other, I guess, hub or sites that might help as well from a startup perspective to get more insight about executives or founders that anybody is familiar with? I'm only really familiar with Glassdoor. So if that's it, that's it. But if there's others.
Glassdoor is definitely the big one. However, depending on the industry that a company serves, you can sometimes find stuff on Indeed.com as well. So I
Mhm.
definitely check there. But now you can just use ChatGPT and it'll go out and it'll do all the hard work for you. And ask it to go out and scrub for employee reviews for a certain company and serve them up to you. You have to be very direct with ChatGPT. Paint a picture. I am a candidate. I am interviewing here for this type of role. I need detailed insights on employee experience. Like just be very like prescriptive, like you're giving step-by-step instructions to someone on how to make a peanut butter and jelly. I don't know if you've seen that video, but like, just be very, very, very direct. And then it'll serve a lot of things up to you.
Okay.
Perplexity is also a good place to check because it's designed to look at on the internet.
What was that one? I'm sorry.
Perplexity. Here, I'll write that. Perplexity.ai. It's like Claude and the others.
Mm-hmm.
Any other sort of insights or questions that came up? It could be something that you shared with the group too.
So, on the research side, was it from Kathy or is it from Miranda? I'm not sure. There are a lot of AI plus human supported interviewing options listed. Uh, was it from Jan's side? Was it from Step Up Exchange?
Um,
The
oh,
the ta
you mean Talent Way. Yeah, so Talent Way, what they are doing is first of all, they scrape very completely to get all the different jobs that are out there for CS, but they also are connecting with some of the companies and working directly with them. And then what they're doing now is they've pivoted a little bit and they're taking on a group of maybe 10 people in each cohort, and sometimes up to 15, and they will actually guide people through their application process and send on your resume to the hiring managers. So that's very interesting. It is it's paid, but it's not that high of a fee per week considering kind of what they're doing. So that's definitely another thing to take a look at for Talent Way.
I do have to hop.
Yeah, it's the hour.
And I just want to thank everybody for being so welcoming. And it was so nice talking to you all. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, in the presentation, I put a slide in there of some articles that I've written. And also, there is a talk from CS 100 in there where I talk through how I pretty much wound a company down. It is a really good one to listen to because it'll kind of give you things that you should be assessing for. I think it's like a 30-minute talk, but I walk through like the perfect storm that happened that resulted in winding a company down. That is really great things that you can jot down to take away to interview companies for.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a really, and again, part of what inspired me to bring Miranda to you today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It was nice meeting
you.
some of you and nice seeing some familiar faces.
Thank you so
Thanks so
much.
much,
Thank you.
Miranda.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Miranda.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.